how have you processed it the last year? And maybe walk us through a little bit of like what has helped you to get through this stuff.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So my dad died May 15th, 2020. He actually died from COVID. And it was a really traumatic death. Like, couldn't see him or visit him in the hospital. He was in the hospital for like 6 weeks on a ventilator. He couldn't see, he couldn't talk. I just watched my dad die for 6 weeks, literally. And it was just terrible. The last time I saw, like, the only time we got to see him in the hospital was after he died. So my whole thing was like, I had this traumatic image of my dead father that like wouldn't get out of my head, and like just like traumatic images of him suffering and just not being able to get it out of my head. So that was tough. The other thing was tough is that like, because it was COVID, he was so alone. Like I said, we couldn't visit him in the hospital, but like even the nurses, like compared to a normal person, how they would take care of a normal person when they're dying, it's like people were so afraid, especially back then, that like I felt like he got no care and like was just alone suffering. So like that really, really like hurts, especially because he was like this generous, amazing man who put all his nieces and nephews through college and gave so much to charity and was this community. He was just such a good guy. And he was a surgeon. He saved many lives himself. So for me, I'm like, geez, is there a God? Like, how could such a good guy go so bad when literally his job was to save lives and then nobody was there to save his life? It makes me sick when I think about it. So that was tough. I feel like on top of just losing someone, I feel like I lost somebody in a really traumatic way. And the other piece that was really tough was his funeral. I mean, at the time we weren't really allowed. He had so many friends, and we could have 6 people at his funeral. They didn't even let us like prepare his body in any way. They buried him with his like hospital clothes and with his shoes and his cell phone and all that shit. And like that to me also was like, oh, stab me in the heart. Like this guy doesn't deserve this, right? So really tough. I think a lot of people would have been stuck. I think a lot of people would have been like, screw life, nothing matters anymore, And I can't pinpoint and tell you like, hey, I don't know. Like, I don't know why. Maybe it was all this ups and downs I've had in my life in the past, I also think that my dad came from nothing. So my dad grew up in Palestine in a room with 6 people. He grew up on figs and pita bread his whole life, like didn't even have meat, like couldn't even afford meat when he was younger, had no electricity, no water. All he had was the light on his walk to school. All he cared about was studying because he knew the only way he could get out is to study his way and get scholarships. And so he got a scholarship to college. He got a scholarship to med school. He ended up coming to America, becoming a surgeon, became chief of surgery, had a medical center, and he became super successful and then took all his family out of poverty. So for me, he was always this like role model of like anything is possible. The American dream is possible. Anything is possible. And I felt like I had no excuse to not be successful. So when he was on his deathbed, I decided to start my marketing agency and go 100% full steam ahead on my dreams. And part of it was because I was like, man, like life can end at any second. And my dad did it from nothing. I at least got everything that he built for me as a stepping stone. And I can't just throw this away. And I felt like to make him proud, I've got to go all in and just do this. And while he was in the hospital, I swear, like I started this company and my podcast at the same time also like kind of blew up. It's like everything just blew up all in a positive way. I say blow up. I mean, like my downloads went from 4,000 a month to 15,000 a day type of thing. Like suddenly, right? And it was just like all this perfect storm. I started this marketing agency. I had a team of 10 volunteers and decided that I was going to start a business with these volunteers and start paying them. And now I'm, a year later, we made almost $2 million in our first year in revenue. And I have 63 paid team members all over the world in America, US, Philippines, India, UK. So it's just crazy that I had this enormous amount of growth. And it all started when he was in the hospital, because I realized that there's this law that Robert Greene taught me about called the law of death denial. And when you're in denial of your death, you are unmotivated, less motivated, and you don't realize that your dreams are possible. But once you start to realize that there is death and you're going to die, that it just kicks you into high gear. And so I feel like it just kicked me into high gear. I was super productive before that. I was still consistent and working on my dreams before that. But I feel like it kicked me into high gear and made me truly believe that life is limitless.
Mm.